Presenting the PR Maven podcast, hosted by Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven. Targeted at business leaders who want to merge the best techniques of traditional networking with the best new platforms and technologies to engage your target audience, build your network, and grow your brand and business. The podcast is sponsored by Marshall Communications, Maine-based, globally connected. Now, here's your host, Nancy Marshall.
Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, episode number 28, presented by Marshall Communications, creator of the Marshall Plan 65-Step Strategic Process. For those of you who are new to the show, I'm your host, Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I want to welcome you. The podcast provides a unique perspective on the world of public relations and personal branding, including what I hope will be actionable takeaways. I want to emphasize the importance of enhancing traditional relationship building with all the options available through today's new technology to extend and strengthen your relationships, both in your business and in your personal life. Every week, the podcast features interviews with successful industry leaders, top executives, and media personalities from around the globe. And this week's guest is no exception. I want to welcome Glynn, who's account supervisor here at Marshall Communications. Welcome, Greg.
Oh, thank you very much, Nancy. It's good to be here.
Well, it's funny. It's nice to have you here, too. But, of course, those of you who have listened to the podcast all along know that Greg has been sitting by my side for every episode. So he's kind of switching roles today. Normally, he's the producer of the podcast. Today, he's guest, actually, and producer. So he's like, what's the expression about a two-headed paper hanger or something?
I'll go with a multi-utility guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. So as an account supervisor at Marshall Communications, Greg manages the public relations and marketing efforts for a wide range of clients. In 2016, he received his accreditation in public relations, which is the APR accreditation, through the Public Relations Society of America, and he is one of only 5,000 plus professionals nationally accredited in this field of public relations. I know that I was very pleased and proud when Greg went through that process, which was somewhat grueling, and he was able to pass the test, which was grueling also. And he's now the only one here at our agency who has this very prestigious accreditation. Greg's attention to detail is an important asset in the coordination of media coverage, press releases, e-newsletters, social media content, plus editing for video and audio projects, including this PR Maven podcast. And I have to say that you can always count on Greg for following through on even the most minute detail, and I appreciate that. Prior to joining the Marshall team, Greg was the Vice President of Communications and play-by-play voice of the Portland Pirates minor league hockey team in Portland, Maine. During his broadcasting career, he has called over 600 games and has experience covering a large and diverse range of high school, collegiate, and professional sports. Greg is a graduate of the Broadcast Journalism program at Quinnipiac University with a minor in marketing. And I was always familiar with Quinnipiac, actually, because I grew up nearby, and Quinnipiac is in Hamden, Connecticut, where I went to the YMCA, and I was on the synchronized swimming team there.
Wow.
And that is a whole other topic that we will not go through today. But sometime I will tell you about my synchronized swimming career in Hamden, Connecticut.
Oh, definitely.
So, Greg, to kick things off, tell us about your career and how you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, and my story is unique, I think, just like everybody we've heard from on the podcast, Nancy, and you never know when your career is going to strike you. And when I was about 14 years old, my dad actually took me to a Worcester Ice Cats game, which was like the Portland Pirates. They played in the American Hockey League down in Massachusetts. And there was this guy sitting up in the stands, and he had a tape recorder, and he was recording the play-by-play into this recorder, and I didn't know what he was doing, so I said, Dad, what is that guy doing? He kind of looks weird that he's doing that. And he said he's trying to be a play-by-play broadcaster, so he's getting a demo tape ready. And I then started to think about, wow, that could be a cool career. I could watch sports for a job. Like, that's amazing. And so from there, I ended up really wanting to try to get into broadcasting. And so when I actually ended up having a back injury in high school with a slipped disc, I wasn't able to play hockey anymore. The doctor said you could get hit and it could be really bad for your back and that kind of thing. So I then decided that, okay, why don't I go into the broadcasting booth? And we took it upon ourselves, me and a friend of mine, we went and we talked to the local cable access channel and said, can we put the hockey games on the air? And they said, absolutely. They've got no content pretty much already, so they're like, well, anything you can do would be great. And so we branded the local cable access channel as 61 Sports. And we would have these broadcasts, and that eventually led me to do hockey games in high school, which gave me a head start when I got to Quinnipiac to say, I've already done games. I've already done, at that point, I'd probably done 12 or 14 games, which as a 16, 17-year-old kid is a lot, So that was really cool to be able to get that. And I think I took advantage of college as much as possible because I knew what I wanted to do. From that very moment I saw that guy doing that game, I thought, wow, if I could be a sports broadcaster, that would be awesome. So everything from writing for a U.S. College Hockey magazine, the student newspaper, 4 years in TV and radio. I became the sports director at the radio station, the TV station my senior year, and my good friend at Quinnipiac, who I keep in touch with today, Jess Camarato, she called me a 40-year-old in a 22-year-old body by the time I was a senior because I just was so focused on my career that it was just all I really focused on. It was so much different than other kids because they had been thinking about, oh, now what do I do in my life? I'm like, let's go. So, and I got my position with the Pirates right out of college. So.
Well, you are the epitome of focus, and I listened to John Lee Dumas and his podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and he says that focus stands for follow one course until success.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that awesome?
Is
yeah, and
I
feel like you have really done that, and you are exceptionally gifted with that focus, which a lot of people in this world, including myself, have. I am always thinking, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and it's hard to focus on one thing. So I commend you for that.
Well, thank you.
And I also want to say it's interesting because your dad was instrumental in helping you choose your career, as was my dad. When I was 17 and I first did some public relations work, and that's when I decided I wanted to go into PR because of my dad. So it kind of shows, and both of us are parents also. It shows how important it is, kind of guiding your children, but maybe not dictating or mandating what they do.
I will say my mom is the one who said you should apply to Quinnipiac. She had talk about networking. She had a friend that was a staff member at Quinnipiac, so she was very much aware of Quinnipiac. And I was like, Quinna, what? and so, but she was like, oh, I hear they have a good upcoming program for hockey. And then I was like, okay, I'll go visit. And then that's what ended up getting me there.
Yeah.
And the beautiful campus, as you know, is beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome, too. And I'll just say, too, my mom was instrumental in encouraging me to apply to Colby as well.
Okay. So there you go.
We have that in common. If you had it to do over again, Greg, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question, and I've heard a lot of different responses, obviously, producing the podcast. And mine actually isn't about a decision. It's actually more about a theme in my life, which has been chronic back issues. And one decision that I would have made differently was I was, at one point, in the AHL, you do a lot of things. So, as you said, I was a play-by-play broadcaster, which was my dream. But along with that, to accomplish your dream, you do everything from team services, you're booking the hotels, you're doing the team meals, you're coordinating all the community events. So you wear like 5 different hats. And I was carrying about 100 pounds of luggage and radio gear into a hotel in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I ended up carrying so much that I had to drop it all. And I had actually realized that later I had a slipped disc. So I had surgery in 2008 to try and fix that. It's certainly better than it was then, but it was more difficult to ride on buses 10 to 20 hours a week. And then I started to think about, gosh, am I going to be able to keep this up? And the lifestyle that I was leading of traveling and just the gear alone, it was becoming a lot. So After a while, I reached out to you and decided to take my career toward public relations and marketing, which were some of the things I was doing, obviously, with the Pirates, because I was wearing so many hats. I felt as though I definitely had good experience in that area, and I obviously had a minor in marketing. So I was able to do that. And I don't know if you remember, Nancy, but I sent my resume in a FedEx envelope because I knew the importance of branding and standing out. And if this agency was getting a lot of resumes and one came in a FedEx and one came in a manila envelope, the one in a FedEx would have stood out. So
I have to confess I don't remember that, but I'm sure that I noticed your sense of urgency, and that's something that I always appreciate as someone who has a sense of urgency and also, wanting to stand out from the crowd. So that was very good.
Yep.
But I do definitely remember when we first interviewed you, and we were like, "Wow, he's had a really great career already, and he wants to move to Augusta, Maine." And of course, we have to give Cindy some credit because you were
dating at the time, and that was one of the things that we were going back and forth. We were doing the Portland-Augusta shuttle, we would call it, and came up here, and it turns out she literally had a place that was less than a mile from our old office. And we Googled it, and we found Nancy Marshall Communications, of course, at the time, and I was like, where is this place? And we literally drove to 20 Western Avenue, and sure enough, there it was. And I was like, well, then let's do it.
Yeah. So. That's great. And when we interviewed Jen Bowes on this podcast, she talked about how our location in Augusta also was a major attractor for her as well. So I'm glad that has worked out. Those are, you and Jen are two long-standing members of our team here who have brought so much to the table.
Thank you.
So, Greg, give me an example of how PR and social media have helped to advance you personally, your organization, or a client.
Now, I do have the advantage, of course, of having heard many of episodes before. So I really thought about this, and I think that there's a really cool answer here. So since working with you, Nancy, since 2009, I've had the opportunity to work with a wide range of clients. We know that. But I have an example that I think hits on all three. So personally, the organization here as an agency, and also a client. So the first year when I started working in the agency, I was working on the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association account. And they were looking for a spokesperson for their responsibility campaign. And that was, of course, recommended as part of the Marshall Plan, which was a 3-year strategic public relations and marketing plan. And ultimately, we worked with them to identify Olympian Julia Kluge, who was from Augusta, to be their spokesperson for this responsibility campaign. And much like the distributors who are often overlooked, Julia competes in the sport of luge, which is also overlooked and confused with the bobsled, as she'll tell you. But the challenge was how to connect Julia, which really she was kind of under the radar, and how we were going to find her, because that was the thing, is it wasn't like a Seth Westcott where they have an agent, somebody that we could get in touch with. So no one around the table kind of knew her, so we reached out on Facebook. And on May 12, 2010, I sent a message to her that basically said, one of our clients is looking to do a public service announcement in Maine to address teens and young adults. The client and I see you as a great role model for Maine kids, and I think you'd be a great fit. So that was a message on Facebook. She later responded on Facebook saying that she'd be interested. So we connected her with Nick Alberding, the president of the association. She became the spokesperson for the responsibility campaign that was extremely successful for their community outreach, their branding, and their public relations. And during the 7 years of a campaign that started because of a message on Facebook, they ended up reaching more than 20,000 students at more than 60 schools across the state of Maine. And that's really a huge success for them as a client. For me to lead an account like that my first year was a big deal, and also gain a personal friend in Julia in the process. It's really a win-win all around.
Yeah, that definitely stands out, I think, in the history of this agency as a client that I feel that we did a really great job for. And of course, Julia was a tremendous asset in so many ways, and she touched so many lives. And, she did start Julia Kluge's Camp for Girls, which does continue on through the Kennebec Valley YMCA. at their summer location in Reedfield.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm really happy, to see how you and I, we're sitting here in Greg's office, and I'm looking at the cover of Maine Women magazine, where Julia was featured on the cover. When was that, Greg?
Yeah, that was in 2012.
2012, yeah. And just to see how she evolved also, and kind of took ownership of her own personal brand and became so influential. And I think the message that she sent to girls, which is so needed, is just be your authentic self and be true to yourself, and to just go for it in life. And I feel that she did so much good for the Maine Beer and Wine Distributors Association, and you really, really molded that campaign. So I'm very proud of that, and all the good work we did for them. Mm-hmm. And of course, in keeping with our theme at this agency of how we dive right into our clients' business. For example, when we were working with Northern Outdoors Adventure Resort, I became a registered whitewater rafting guide. And then when we were working with the beer and wine distributors, you got up at 3:30 in the morning and went on the delivery route.
Yep, the delivery truck. I remember being out there, and it's all these small mom and pops that they're, the person from the store would say, "Hey, how you doing today, Joe?" And, or Mike, and they'd come out and they'd talk with them, and it's that's the personal connection they wanted me to see, and I really got a better understanding for how hard these distributors work. I mean, these guys are lugging around big boxes of cases of wine and beer, and if it doesn't get to them that day, they're out. I mean, this is a fresh product they have to have in there, and so that was a really unique experience, but it gained so much more respect for what they do, and then I was able to take pictures, and we leveraged it for the website and everything like that, so it was a great opportunity.
Well, this is, again, another thing that gives me such great pleasure in running an agency as I do here, and sort of setting the tone that is then taken on by other members of our team. You did that, and then subsequently we were working with a hospital, and several of our team members went in and observed a surgery taking place so that they could really delve into the client's business and the challenges that they face every day. So I feel that we're definitely hands-on when we're working with a client and really get involved with their day-to-day business and challenges. So speaking of challenges, what are some of the obstacles to success in your career, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, and I think that this one really goes back to my back and my health, because as we know, I wanted to be a broadcaster. I was able to accomplish that. Funny enough, I actually broadcast from the Worcester Centrum back as it was called in the day, which is the exact same location where that guy was recording that tape. I've broadcast from that location multiple occasions. One was the first ever time that Quinnipiac made the NCAA hockey tournament, which was a huge deal. And then I also was there when I was with the Portland Pirates, broadcasting in games against the Worcester Ice Cats at the time, who later became the Worcester Sharks. But the idea that you could accomplish your dream and go and do that. But the thing is about my health is that, it's something I've had to overcome, physical therapy, all those types of things after the surgery. But I decided to take my career in a different direction. I think that's been a bit of a blessing. Because I don't know what would have happened with that lifestyle. I certainly would not have met Cindy because I really made a conscious decision to slow things down a little bit. And I think that it was really that. And then obviously over the last few years, I have had a wrist surgery. But the thing is my health is always going to be there. This is going to be chronic. It's how you deal with it is what's going to make you successful. So I think that's one of the things that I've tried to really manage is setting up an ergonomic workstation, taking time for myself, deep breathing, meditation. You and I have talked about that. I've made adjustments in my life over the last really 2 years that I think have been drastically different than what I used to do, which was try to just grind through it. But I found different ways to really meditate, to relax, to stretch, that have really improved my back, but also my mental health, which I worked for a mental health client, interestingly enough, to be able to learn a lot more about how important your mental health is, and that opened up some things for me as well. Yeah,
well, I have observed you as you've been sort of evolving over the past couple of years, and as we've talked about, I also have used the app on my phone called Calm. I use it to kind of settle down at night because I have a hard time slowing down after like going 100 miles an hour all day long. And so you and I kind of have faced some of those challenges together, and just to be more mindful in life and at work and in dealing with other people is so positive and so valuable.
Absolutely.
So we're going to continue more with Greg Glynn, but now it's time for our book and things to do today pad giveaway. We just got these new beautiful PR Maven podcast or PR Maven Nation things to do today pads. If you're like us, actually, and I'll speak, both Greg and I love making to-do lists, and then there's really these great boxes so you can check things off and feel really organized. And it also has these are my top 3 priorities to get done today. And I just love these little pads. They're monarch size. They're like half of what an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So if you want to have one of those pads plus a copy of my book called PR Works, just go to prmaven.com/giveaway. And, I know that one of our previous winners and one of our loyal listeners is Joe Albert from Amy Allward Insurance in Portland. And I got a message from him the other day that he received his package and he was just so thrilled. So Joe is kind of like us too. He likes those daily to-do lists and checking things off. So anyway, this is a little shout out to Joe Albert if you're listening. So As we said before, this podcast is presented by Marshall Communications, the creator of the 65-step Marshall Plan strategic process. That's another 65 steps that we like to check off as we go through the process. And to learn more about the Marshall Plan, visit marshallpr.com. And we will be back in just a moment, and you're going to hear Greg talking about the Marshall Plan.
Hey PR Maven Nation, Greg here from Marshall Communications. I want to talk about your marketing strategy. Some days do you feel like you're a hamster running in a wheel? Perhaps you're just running the same ad in the same publication because that's the way you've always done it. Or do you not even know how many media impressions you got from that news story last month? Do you feel like sometimes you're doing a lot of work but not seeing the results? Well, the good news is you're not a hamster. And if you're feeling like your marketing plan could be better, we would love to help. At Marshall Communications, we work with a wide range of businesses and organizations to create a customized marketing strategy known as the Marshall Plan. During a period of 3 months, we meet with you and your top stakeholders to learn about your world, what keeps you up at night, and best of all, the ways we can work together to combine your knowledge and our marketing and public relations experience to avoid the feeling of spinning in a wheel, and create a 3-year marketing plan that provides you with a vision for success. The Marshall Plan is fully customized and uses our 65 proprietary steps and leads to a playbook for your success. And trust me, it feels so much better than running around in a wheel. Now, it's a great time to get your business going, grow your business, increase your profits, and most importantly, measure your results. If you think your business or organization would be a candidate for a Marshall Plan, you can take our Marshall Plan quiz to find out. Visit marshallpr.com/quiz. And if you'd like to schedule a free consultation about a Marshall Plan, visit marshallpr.com/consult or call us at 207-623-4177. Be sure to mention the code PODCAST for your free gift.
Welcome back to the PR Maven podcast, and today we're talking with Greg Glynn, Account Supervisor at Marshall Communications, and I want to dive right back in with some more questions I know that our listeners in PR Maven Nation are interested in hearing. Greg, how do you measure success in your PR, social media, and marketing?
So I think this is a great question because there are so many different ways you can measure things these days. And my really appreciation for measurement, I think, comes from my love of stats. Because being involved, obviously, in the sports world, you're getting stats about the player and how many goals they have, how many assists they have. And that's very easy to measure. Okay, you've got a really good hockey player because he has 50 goals this season. But when it comes to PR, social media, and marketing, it's a little bit different because you've got to be able to dive deeper into those details. And so when I think about PR, social media, and marketing, I think it comes down to research. A lot of people forget that step, and it's an important step because if you can't figure out what is already the case, so doing the research to figure out what is your brand awareness right now or how many website visitors you're getting before you start a campaign, you can't say, oh, well, after a year or after 2 years, we improved by 10% or 20%. And I think that you can look at that, and it's always about what is the most important thing for our clients. So their success, obviously, not about goals and assists, but it's more about sales or donations or brand awareness. And I love using the tools like Google Analytics and Facebook Insights to figure out what is working, what adjustments can be made, and how they can be more successful and reach their goals. And like we said, research is so key in that because we want to know a baseline of where they're starting so that we can take them to the next level. And that was one thing that was clear to me when I went and I achieved my accreditation for public relations, as you said, Nancy, in 2016, is we have to focus on research first, because if we don't know where we are today, then we aren't going to be able to figure out where we want to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
Right. And what's the saying? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
You need to, or like the Simon Sinek book, start with why. You need to start with the end in mind. So that's definitely important. I mean, sometimes clients will come to us and say, you know, what would the action steps be, and you know, what should our goals be? And it's different for every single client. We can't mandate what someone's goals should be. And I actually feel like that's something that differentiates our approach with the Marshall Plan too. Is I always say, you know, we don't come in as the consultants from away. You know, these highfalutin people who think so highly of themselves. You know, we come in and say, you know, we want to really work collaboratively with you and help you, you know, together we'll help you decide on what your goals are and what the strategies and tactics are, and also the measures of success, because there's no standard measures of success, because for some it might be increasing sales, for some it might be increasing brand awareness, or for nonprofits increasing memberships and donations. So that's one of the things that I love about the Marshall Plan process. So, Greg, most successful people have a network of fans and followers, either online or in person or both. Tell me how you have built your network of fans and followers, and has it been a conscious goal or has it happened on its own?
For me, this has certainly been a conscious effort. I know your background as well, Nancy, and wanting to get out there, and you just felt like you wanted to meet people from a very young age. And for me, it was my dad who was always taking me places. There's actually one time where he took me downtown Boston, left me in a car while he ran in to do a delivery, and I'm there on the street, and a police officer came up to the window and said, "You need to move this car now." And I'm 16, I just got my license, and I'm trying to now figure out, am I going to move this car? Am I going to wait for my dad to come back? Because this police officer clearly wants me out of, and there's like people honking, you know, the whole thing. And I remember getting in the car and moving the car, driving around the block. I had no idea where I'm going. But it was my dad who always brought me anywhere and would throw me into a situation, have me meet people. And I learned, you know, to have that good eye contact, to shake people's hands. He was a delivery person. He was marketing for Gatorade at the time. And so we would go to all the arenas around, pro sports teams in New England, colleges. That's where I really grew up, is in these arenas. And he would bring in the Gatorade. He'd do his delivery with the two-wheeler, and he'd say, "I want to have you meet my son," you know, blah, blah, blah. And I meet the trainer and that kind of thing. And Ed Lacerte, who was a trainer for the Celtics, still is one of the people he always thinks about. Was such a great guy, and so I always got to hear these stories from him on the road. But he would take me out there, and he really showed me what it meant to meet people and have these relationships and how valuable they can be. And he was the one who said it's a small world, and you know, these people are going to be people down the line that could help you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that your father did that, because, I know that when you and I go places together, I never even think twice about having you meet people, or, there are some people that are so introverted, and it really makes them feel anxious and nervous to have to meet people, but I've never worried about that with you. Of course, driving in Boston, it's interesting you mentioned that, because there's not a lot of things that I am afraid of, but I am afraid of driving in Boston. I just cannot it's just so crazy there, and the roads don't make it.
It was right down by the TD Garden, well, what was the Boston Garden, I'm dating myself, but the idea was he was delivering to these places right around the garden. So it's not like we were just on some side street, like we were literally in downtown Boston. I'll never forget it. It was like, all right, let's go. It was that fighter flight,
Right.
And I was ready to drive that car. So.
That was great. Yeah. Were you able to find your father?
I just kept driving around the loop until I saw him come out. I mean, I had nowhere to go. I just kept doing the same loop with my hands like shaking on the wheel, like am I turning my blinker on? Like everything.
Because that was probably before the age of cell phones.
Oh yeah.
I know for some of our listeners, they can't even imagine life without cell phones. But there was a time that we used phone booths. So in building your network, Greg, which hurdles did you personally face, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting thing that I learned actually as the broadcaster for the Pirates. I always felt as though I had this competitive spirit in me, and I thought about, that's the broadcaster for the other team, and I don't want to give them too much information, or they're the competition. But as I realized in my career as I grew up as a broadcaster, is that those people are the industry. You need to meet them and appreciate those relationships more, because they're not the competition. It may be the Providence Bruins that we're playing or the Worcester Sharks, but the idea of what I started to realize is that broadcasters are like a fraternity, and that we all have mutual respect for each other because we know what we go through to do our job. We all love what we do, but we also do a bunch of other things. And I really was able to realize that in my broadcasting career. I now use that certainly to build on those relationships that I have with a lot of the broadcasters at the time and now still today. And I think one of the other things that I wish I had been able to do, and I'm still trying to overcome this, is I wish I had been able to keep in touch more with my friends from high school. I had a great core of friends, and still do. I still keep in touch with some of them, but over time I've lost touch with them more than I thought I would. And it's unfortunate because Facebook came along about 8 years too late for me to have them all be on Facebook. Now, granted, they have eventually come on to Facebook, but I have kept in touch a lot more with my college friends because Facebook came out right around the time I graduated college, so we all kind of jumped on at the same time. It was a lot easier. But I think that, and I still try to build on the relationships that I have in high school, but it's funny because I really think of Facebook more like baby book at this point, because we're all in the same age bracket where people are having babies all over the place. And that's how we kind of connect, is I see that somebody's having, a child, and I'm able to reach out and say, hey, congrats. And, that's one of the ways I've been able to kind of get back in touch with a lot of people. And those get, of course, the most engagement.
Well, and I know that, you've got Kelsey, who was with us last week when we went to the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, the Gardens Aglow, and we had such a nice evening walking around the gardens with Kelsey. Yeah,
and she's a joy. And the other funny thing about Facebook, I talk about it being baby book. So about a year ago, my daughter was wondering, where do babies come from? That question, right? I'm like, oh boy, that's a loaded question. And she goes, oh, babies come from Facebook. And I'm like, okay, that's good enough for now. But that's where
you made me nervous. It's like, okay, this is a G-rated podcast.
Yeah. So it's funny, how she thinks about it. But that's where she sees a lot of babies, So.
Greg, how has your network helped you to advance your career?
Yeah, so I think this one really goes back to my broadcasting circle that I started out with coming out of college. And I, of course, had a mentor that was so important in my success. His name is Bill Schweitzer. I broadcasted hockey games with him at Quinnipiac, and We were there together for 4 years, and he helped me in so many ways. One time, he actually helped me get eventually paid. I took a bus trip out in 2002 to Michigan State. The team was playing the Spartans, and at the time I was not getting paid. I was doing all the games. I would travel with the team, but this was during the winter break. And so I was home in Massachusetts, and I was like, I'm going to take a bus. To me, that was like, that's what we do. We get on buses, we go do games. So I took a Greyhound bus, 25 hours out to Michigan State, and then 32 hours, let that sit in, 32 hours on a bus. And the reason why I was longer on the way back, we ran into a snowstorm in Buffalo, New York. I spent the night in the Buffalo bus terminal in one of those photo booths. But at that point, I wasn't getting paid. When I returned from that trip, he made sure that I was getting paid for doing these games. And that really meant a lot to me because he obviously respected what I was doing. We had created a great relationship. 2018, he eventually ended up retiring from broadcasting, but he referred me to their current radio broadcaster for the Bobcats, which is Paul Pacelli, who then reached out to me because he knew I had been doing work with Bill. And when Quinnipiac came up to play Maine, he said, hey, you want to come do the games? And I said, absolutely. And so he, because of my relationship with Bill, Bill had passed on to him kind of like a referral. Hey, if you need a guy who wants to do the games, Greg is great, and he'd be great at it. And he called me up, and that's how that network continues to grow.
And he's even willing to sleep in a photo booth.
Absolutely.
Wow, I thought I had made sacrifices for my career. I've never had to spend the night in a photo booth. Hopefully I never will.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Well, isn't it great, sometimes when you think back over your career and the obstacles you faced and what you've done for your job, it's pretty remarkable.
Absolutely.
In your line of work, what resource such as a book, website, or app have you found to be helpful and why?
So I love my Apple phone, but I also love my Apple Watch. Those are the two devices that I use which tie into this resource or this app. And it's the Reminders app on these iPhones that you'll find helpful, I think, because all the details of day-to-day life. We talk about meditation and stress and things like that, but this app basically allows you to put down something while you're thinking of it. You put it on your phone, or even you can say it to Siri on your watch. But the idea is that you can tell it to remind you at a certain time. So, for example, trash day is Thursday mornings for us. And so rather than having to worry or try to remember when trash day is or remember at the last minute that it's trash day, I put it on my Reminders app, and every Thursday at 7 a.m. I get the same reminder, and it just reminds me to take out the trash. Now, it seems like a very small thing, but the other thing it does is, let's say I'm on my way home and I'm thinking about something, I can just talk to it and it puts it on there. So, hey Siri, call Nancy at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And it puts it on my Reminder app, and then once that time comes, I do it. I don't have to sit there and use what I call brain bandwidth trying to remember that for the next day and a half or whatever it may be. And it has helped me out so much because it allows me to focus more on the big picture in life rather than the small things. And that's been so helpful. Now, I have been known to be sleeping, and I used to get up in the middle of the night, scramble for the paper and get my pen, and in the dark I'm like, okay, email this client about this, right? And I'd get up in the morning, I'd read the paper and I'd go, what does this say? But now I can just, 5 o'clock, whatever it is, you're thinking about something, you're going to get up in an hour, you're like, can I remember this? And I'm like, okay, hey Siri, set a reminder, and I can do it, and it looks a lot better because it's not handwritten, it's on my phone. So that's been a really big help for me.
Well, I know what you're talking about, the bandwidth in your brain, or I like to think of my brain as if it's like a hard drive, and sometimes I feel like all of those, I got to remember to do this and this and this. It takes up all of the hard drive space in my brain. So something like that does free up space.
Absolutely.
Kind of like the feeling of being organized, which I know is your superpower.
It's kind of my thing.
What would be your one piece of advice for someone starting out in their career?
So I would suggest trying to find your passion early. One thing that I really liked about working with Julia Kluge was her message in her high school presentations of this trying new things. You never know what might be your passion in life. Obviously, she found luge, as a very young child. For me, I found broadcasting. I found marketing and PR were going to be a part of my future. My dad was doing that. I liked what he was doing. He was selling a product. He was marketing a product. Obviously, Gatorade was a huge brand. That was when Michael Jordan was around, and it was the Be Like Mike campaign. And I would sing that song as a kid. And so I really had an appreciation for branding early on. And then obviously seeing that guy doing the broadcasting up in the booth and recording into a tape recorder at the time, which they don't even have anymore. But I think it's so important to, and I'm going to encourage this with Kelsey as much as possible, but it's try new things. Just try it once. Kels, that includes your vegetables, but it's the other things that, encouraging your children to go after their dreams, try new things. You never know what's going to spark their interest, and let them do it. Let them try it.
Well, I think that's great too, and I think as parents also we need to remember that we are role models, so they're watching us eat our vegetables or going new places or meeting new people, and I know that that's been something that, with my two sons, that they have observed me as I've networked my way through life, and I think that has definitely rubbed off on them. Yep.
And I will take her. I'm just like my dad. I always want to be like my dad in the sense that he took me everywhere. I will take her everywhere, and she may say, "Oh, I just want to stay home today," or that's fine. But I will always give her that opportunity. You want to come, because you never know what she's going to see.
That's right. Yeah. That's great. So, Greg, what is the one parting thought you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so I certainly wanted to try and connect all the dots for our listeners, how this podcast was born. So based on my passion for broadcasting, which we've talked about, and how I became the play-by-play voice for the Portland Pirates, I went to a broadcasting school, Quinnipiac, where I learned the skills to broadcast sports and edit audio and video. And while this has helped me in my broadcasting career, which I still do, I do freelance work. I'm broadcasting for high schools, colleges, and even some professional stuff still, and I have that opportunity. It has been a huge asset for me, my broadcasting background, as we launched this podcast. And I think together we found a real sweet spot with this podcast because we both enjoy it so much. We have the skills that make a podcast successful, from organization to the editing to your zest for life and your interviews with people, that you talk to people and you can get so much out of them because of who you are and the way that you present yourself, and you have so many great relationships and have built these relationships, and stories that come out of these podcasts are really amazing, and I think people really appreciate that. And then I think also, when I think about a parting thought, I think about a lot of our conversation today. It's been about the career that I've had, and also then how I've been able to handle some challenges mentally, physically. But about 2 years ago, I went through a rough patch with this wrist surgery, and the challenges that impacted me in ways that I had to carefully think about how am I going to kind of live my life a little bit differently and change things. And I think that, as you said, you've noticed it. But the thing is that as a planner, I actually started working on my will. And I was thinking about it, not because I'm thinking about dying in that way, but I actually wanted to have it ready just in case, because I'm a planner, that I would have my will ready. And it also came up because we were doing some financial work and things like that, and a will is obviously always a good idea. But I came up with this because I wanted to live by this moving forward. And there are 3 things that you can control in life: your attitude, your gratitude, and your effort. And if you can focus on these 3 things every day, you're going to find success. And I think that some people do a lot better job at it than others.
I think that's great. And wow, that's a pretty significant piece of parting advice. Yeah. Attitude, gratitude, and effort.
Yeah, so there are 3 things that you can control, because as you know, I like to organize things. I like to have things just so. And there are things in life you can't control, right?
You can't control other people's attitude or gratitude.
Exactly. So if you control your own, so your attitude toward that person or your gratitude toward some type of event, or hey, it's great to be here, or I'm glad we're all around the table. You and I did that recently when we had a slow order at a restaurant. We enjoyed everyone's company. It's all in how you manage the situation. And I always like also the other one, the third one, which I really added on here because I think it is so important. And I tell this to Kelsey every day as much as I can. Your attitude, your gratitude, and that last one is so important, that effort. No one can tell you how hard you try. It's up to you to try as hard as you want. And that's so important.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
So my final question is to help PR Maven Nation to connect with you. What are some of the ways that our listeners can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm active on Facebook, as we know, or Baby Book as I call it these days. And then LinkedIn is a great place I find to grow your professional network, so I'm on there as well. And then Twitter at Greg Glynn. That's all one word. I actually had a guy contact me once. He said, congratulations on getting your Twitter handle. My name's also Greg Glynn, and you got it before me.
That was good.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. So, and then email, of course, obviously a great way, gglynn@marshallpr.com.
Yeah. And it is Greg Glynn, because a lot of times people call him Glenn, which is kind of like a combination of his first and last name. I think you're used to being called that.
I am. And then I always try to work harder to make my name stand out better.
Yeah.
I use it as motivation. So.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's been a lot of fun having this conversation with you. And if anyone would like to reach out to me with any suggestions of future guests or topics you'd like us to talk about here on the PR Maven podcast, you can email me at nancy@prmaven.com. And it actually, Greg also helps me check every single email to make sure that I do follow through. So we definitely will not let that slip through the cracks. And remember, go to prmaven.com/giveaway to get a copy of PR Works, my book, as well as a Things to Do Today pad. And those pads are just awesome. And this podcast is presented by Marshall Communications, the creator of the 65-step Marshall Plan strategic process. And to learn more about the Marshall Plan, please visit marshallpr.com. And you can also check out the Marshall Communications webinar series, which Greg manages. And they're very, very helpful topics. For a free schedule or a full schedule of our free webinars, visit marshallpr.com/webinars. And I just want to thank you for tuning in to the PR Maven podcast. And please subscribe to the podcast at prmaven.com/podcast. And tell your family and friends also to subscribe, and please leave ratings and reviews, because that's really the fuel that keeps the podcast going. And I just want to remind you, as Greg and I have been talking about today, that those old-fashioned relationships, like our relationships dating back to high school and college, and then leveraging your relationships with all the new technology available through social media, it's so important in building a successful personal and professional brand, and basically just finding happiness in life. So have a great week, PR Maven Nation, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for joining us on the PR Maven podcast. For show notes, links, contact information on our guests, and way to connect with Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven, go to prmaven.com. Subscribe, like, and share to support this podcast and bring on more great info on how to connect, build your network, and build your brand.